Hey everybody, and welcome to Ben and Nate's Questions That We Ask Massage Therapists on the Internet. We got a special treat for you guys. By the way, my name's Nate Fabe, massage therapist, osteopath, and teacher for Dalton myoskeletal alignment techniques. And this is a rare treat because I'm actually sitting next to Ben instead of through a screen several thousand miles away.
This is so weird. My name is Ben Stone. I'm your co-host of Ben and Nate's Questions We Ask Massage Therapists on the Internet, and it's so cool that I get to be right next to Nate and see him in person, and it's just weird though. So
yeah.
We're glad to be here. We're in Omaha, Nebraska right now. What are we doing here, Nate?
Well, Ben Stone said to me, Nate, come out to Omaha, Nebraska, teach a myoskeletal class. I was a little skeptical. I was a little worried about it. But I can safely say, man, we have an amazing class of 37 therapists that showed up to learn the art of mat this weekend. So it's been super, super awesome, and we're about halfway through our day 2 right now. And what a great, great class we're having.
I mean, one of the things that I always say, we've said in past episodes, is investing in yourself. That's one thing that you can't be taxed on. Nobody can take it away. The more you learn, the more valuable you make yourself to your customers, to all the people around you. It just levels up your game.
Yeah, man. And our clients are always asking us, your clients over time will catch on to you and say, like, what are you doing this weekend? Are you taking any class? You learn anything new that you can try out on me? Right? We hear that all the time, right?
I hear my clients say, when's your next class?
Yeah,
like
that's
they don't
right.
even wait for me to go. They say, when are you going to your next class?
Yeah, they don't even wait. That's a fact.
Yeah.
So what we did today, Ben, was on our break, we posed the question to the class. So I asked the class if they had any questions. And somebody, we got a lot of questions about how do we take something like myoskeletal alignment techniques, or what we might call, and you and I were talking about labels, like, do we call this advanced therapy? Do we call it, is this serious, or what? How do we do this? And then how do we take our practice that we've already been working in and start to implement these new things? So I think that's the foundation of the question, is how do we implement some of these new techniques that we learn?
Yeah, how do we make all this stuff work that we learn in a class?
Yeah.
Is that what I'm hearing? Yeah.
I think it is. And the easiest answer that I always say is one client at a time. So particularly that your new clients that are calling your office, especially if they call up and they have neck pain or low back pain, they don't know anything. All they know is that they want you to help them out. So for that new client, you can start in, with these assessments and practicing of the techniques that, like, we're learning this weekend. But let's say you have an existing client, Ben. Let's say you have an existing client that you've been working on for a long time. They're used to a certain type of therapy that you do. And now you've got some new techniques in your option box. And your client comes in for that visit, and let's say they say, I'm starting to get some numbness and tingling in my hand. I just wanted to let you know that. How could we approach that and now introduce some of these new things that we've learned?
Boy, that's a great question. And I think you and I talked about this before, and you just said it, one client at a time, but you said, there's a lot of ways to approach it. One of the things that I would say is, hey, I just learned a few things. Do you mind if we try and address this a little bit more? Which we've talked about in past episodes, managing expectations. Hey, I'm going to spend more time trying to address this issue you have, which means you spend less time working on your feet, on your knees, on your whatever else needs to be. Does that sound like something you want to do? Yeah. Because most people, what do? When they come to you, they say, they don't say, hey, I want you to use this particular technique. They say, my back hurts,
exactly.
My neck hurts. So most people are, hey, you're going to help my back? Let's do it.
Right.
How would you say that you would incorporate these things?
Yeah, pretty similar. So yeah, we'll take that example. I can think of one client, that one longtime client. I've been seeing her for 19 years, and all of a sudden she comes in with like a low back issue, and I'll say to her, well, listen, I go out on the road and do this thing and I learn these techniques. Can we, like you said, can we try something different? Managing expectations, getting your client's permission. Yeah, sure, let's try it. And, then you can maybe introduce an assessment. Well, let me take a look at your standing. And exactly like you said, I know we typically do like a lot of full body work, right? But today, let's just spend a little more time hashing that out. Is that okay with you? So we're almost taking a complicated question, but I think it's a lot simpler than we think about.
Yeah, and we talked about this earlier off camera. We talked about what's the vibe you're putting out. Who are the people you want to work with? If you are putting the vibe out that, hey, I am this type of a therapist, when you start to switch it up and say, hey, I want to do this kind of work, you may have some people that are hesitant. You may have some people that are like, I'm all in. It's just, what's the vibe you're putting out? Who do you want to attract?
Yeah. And at the end of the day, you may lose clients along the way, right? To build that new practice that you always wanted. In the very beginning, when I started to transition my practice to more of having a manual therapy or osteopathic based approach, I lost some clients along the way. But losing clients is okay, because my expectations are, I want those people to get the help that they need. And whatever help that they feel like they need, if that's with another therapist, I'm happy with that. And just like you said, it's going to make room in my schedule for now starting to design and build the practice that I always wanted.
Yeah, that's something we've talked about in past episodes too. Create the practice that you want so that you're happy during your day. Because if you're not happy doing the work that you do, switch it up and find different people to work with. And as you evolve, if you're happy in your work,
yeah.
I mean, how can you not have a good day if you're filling your plate full of people you want to work with versus people you have to work with? Would that be?
I don't have a case of the Mondays, Ben. I never really did. I like going to my office every day, and I always say we, like Erik says, we have one of the best jobs on the planet, and it takes a long time. The reality is this stuff doesn't happen overnight. It probably took me truly 2 to 3 years to really design the practice that I wanted. Some of you might work a lot faster than that. Some of you might work a little slower than that. And the reality is, and maybe you agree with me, maybe you don't, but when you introduce something new to a client that's used to something else, and then all of a sudden the next session, they cancel their visit. And they say, well, I don't think I'm going to come see you anymore, right? Because the expectation in their mind is they were so used to something else. But that's okay. That's all right. I've had clients show up in my office, and this was a learning curve for me a few years ago. Their expectation was they were coming in for more of a traditional session. And I've done what I do best in my room. I've had people sit up off the table and say, well, that's not what I was expecting at all, but my neck feels a lot better, but I think I need to see somebody else, because their expectations of what they should have got, despite how they're feeling, right, is still out of perspective. But shame on me in those early days for not always managing expectations and having those conversations with those people. But it's why they call it practice, right?
Nate, let me ask you, do you really do this type of work with your people? Do you really do assessments? Do you really put people on the table in just shorts and a tank top and do that type of work?
I do. And it took me a long time to get there. It took me several years to, again, design that practice that I know that I wanted. So yeah, I really do it. I'm not in the convincing business, but that's exactly what I do. Somebody in the class today asked, well, don't your clients feel gypped if you work on them for a shorter time? Because, most traditional massage sessions, 30 minutes, 60 minutes, 90 minutes, right? And that was something that was maybe drilled into our head from day one of massage school, that your massage session should be 30 minutes, 60 minutes, 90 minutes. And that's all great. And I'm not saying to try or do something else, but I think the little punk rocker in me too, from back in my younger days, you want to be a little bit more anti-establishment and say we don't need to do that. That's not a set in stone thing. You're not paying me by the minute. I'm not, dare I say, you're not taking me out on a date and paying me by the minute or anything like that, right? It's therapy. You're paying for therapy. If you hire a contractor to come install a roof, he's not going to say at the end, well, it took us, 47 hours to complete your roof, so now your price is going to be this. They give you a base price for cost, materials, and expectation of time and labor, right? And the price is the price. And so usually one of the ways that I manage my clients' expectations is that they know in the beginning when they call, plus receive a follow-up call email, that this is what they're paying for. They're paying for the therapy. They're not paying for time, but for scheduling purposes, you can expect to be on my table around 45 minutes.
So let me ask you this. Was there a period of time where you're setting up this treatment and you know that in the beginning you're going to be spending 15, 20, 30 minutes on assessment and maybe 20 minutes on the actual hands-on work?
Yeah.
Is there a period of time where you, felt that people were getting gypped, or that you had to transition into doing that? Tell me about that process.
In my own head, because of what was drilled into my head in my early days, in my head, I'm like, oh my God, am I gypping these people? And I was like worried about that. But if anything, it was the opposite reaction. When people come back and they say, you've listened to me, you've helped me, they don't care, right? They don't care as long as they feel better. Yeah. And I think Anna's story, now here's the interesting thing too. Now I manage the expectation of 45 minutes. Now if I all of a sudden have 55 minutes of hands-on time, because some of my clients, I do spend a lot of time with them. Now their expectations have changed and they said, hey, you spent way more time with me today. Should I pay you a little bit more for today's session? And I say, no, our time is our time. It's my own fault for, and it's not my fault, but, for going a little bit more.
That's absolutely right. So I want to go back into what we do in our show. I didn't throw out any jokes, so we're going to do jokes at the end.
All right.
So are you ready for some jokes?
I'm ready for some jokes.
All right. I like to kind of keep the theme of what's going on. So it's been cold recently, right? So what did one snowman say to the other snowman?
We have a crowd, by the way. So what did one snowman say to the other snowman?
You smell carrots?
That's right. You smell carrots. Okay. So we've got a few more minutes and we've got to jump back into class, but because this is kind of a live podcast, we're not live, but we're kind of live because we're together again. Yeah. All right. We have some people watching us. Does anyone have any questions that they would like to pose? No pressure.
How do you feel about massaging somebody who has cancer?
Okay. So the question is, that's a good question. So we talked about this a little bit today.
Why don't you repeat the question so that everyone can hear it?
So the question is how do you feel about working with somebody that has cancer? And that could be at any stage, right? Any stage of the game, whether they just found out or they're in a later stage, or maybe you've been trained on hospice care and now you're maybe going and doing some of that end-of-life comforting. How do I feel about it? I feel good about it, man, because people come to us for reasons that we sometimes don't know. And to back off the question just for a minute, I have clients, and I bet you guys do too. I'm like, man, why do they keep coming back to me? I feel like I do horrible work with them. But people come to see you for a reason. And so I feel good about it because sometimes I've never had a disease or a pathology that has altered my life, luckily. But I don't know what it would be like for me, but I think for those patients, right, maybe for them, they're coming to see you just for that comfort, that care, or maybe they're thinking about adding you to just a part of their plan to hopefully get out of that and fight that. How about you, Ben? How do you feel about that?
I think there's a lot of issues about whether they're actively in chemo, whether it's safe to work with them, that kind of thing. But yeah, I have no problems working with someone in chemo, and or I mean, excuse me, with cancer.
Right.
I mean, I think it's a great opportunity that they trust you enough to, you know, put themselves in your care.
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, there's a lot of great educators out there that present classes on that type work. So kind of in line with Ben said, you know, make sure that you do have an understanding of some of these pathologies or diseases that are coming into your practice. But yeah, for sure. Yeah. I've had people come and see me. It's been rare because, I mean, I don't think that's the type of practice that I built, but I've had people call me and they are in their end stages and they just want to come in for a work. And despite everything that we talked about, that's when I jump away from all this stuff, my myoskeletal work, and I just give them like the best session I can give them. Still throwing in these techniques that we learned this weekend, but kind of get out of all that, taking the heavy thinking about it and just giving them the session that they want in that moment, you know?
Yeah. I like this format. We need to do more live sessions. I know we've done one live session in the past.
Yeah, we did one.
We got a bunch of people together on Zoom, but I would love to do this again.
Cool.
So, wrapping things up, tell me, Nate, you know, the question I always like to ask you is what's your big takeaway from what we talked about?
So I think my big takeaway from today's question is that, you know, give yourself time. If you're a therapist looking to change and alter your practice, give yourself time. Don't have your expectations of doing it overnight. It's gonna take, you know, think about from point A to point B. Where do you want to be a year from now or even 5 years from now, and give it that time? How about you, buddy?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I talked about it a little bit. Defining your vibe. Who do you want to be? Who do you want to work with? And changing who you are, what you do to fit that, to make you happier. You know, so if you want to work with people who have chronic pain, injury, that kind of thing, go for it. Make those connections with chiropractors, PTs, that kind of thing. If you want to do more of hospice work or salon work, you know, make yourself happy and do that kind of stuff. So,
absolutely.
But it's always great to learn stuff outside of that realm, so to speak, to help yourself evolve so that you can maybe help someone who has a shoulder issue or has something else that, you know, you may not normally see, but you're like, hey, I got this little book that I'm going to refer to and I think I can help you out. So that's, you know, that would be my takeaway.
I love it, buddy. Hey, awesome. This was episode 31. This was our shortest episode, by the way. Usually we drone on and on for about an hour. So I think this was a world record of our shortest session. So listen, you can check us out on, where can they check us out? YouTube. Spotify. Apple Podcasts. But most importantly, the only way this show continues is if you find us on Facebook, Ben and Nate's Questions That We Ask People on the Internet, and engage those questions that we're asking. It's the only way this podcast happens.
Be our friends on social media.
We need more friends like Tom.
That's right.
See ya.
Thanks for watching, everyone.
Thanks for watching. Oh, woo. See you next time.